which is what I will do today. I'm going to talk a little bit about personal branding because that's a subject that is near and dear my heart. It's something that gave me a voice in a space that women, Latinas, immigrants don't have a voice. It's a tech space that is, we represent less than 2% of the industry. If you add intersectionality and color to that, you become less than 1% of the industry. So lots happening in my space, and how I got here has a lot to do with that. So I'd like to share my screen if you don't mind. I'm going to start sharing my own story and my trajectory and what that meant to me. And how I got here, and hopefully this will give you some good idea on in general what this means for you as you build your business, because I've always also been able to build my business. And so I have, I have a brand consulting business. It's an LLC that I've been also sharing with people on this. I do this on the side. So I'm at Microsoft, I'm an author, I do a business. So all of this happening all at the same time, and really kind of culminating into the space of who I am and who I've become in this so far. I do want to make sure I have two screens, so I don't know which one's sharing. Are you seeing the big screen or the presenter screen? I can share it
We're, s-
differently.
we're I'm seeing the presenter screen where
All
you
right, so now you should see the big screen.
perfect.
Perfect. We're in. Excellent. So, one of the things that has run true to me in my own trajectory is what brand is, like personal branding. Again, I do this in a space at a corporate level. I consult with brands, big and small, and different sectors, private and public. But I also do this for personal branding. And I particularly teach students and young people in, early in career, young people coming into the tech space specifically. And in this trajectory, I've learned that your brand is not who you say you are, but how you make people feel. And that's very important, because a lot of people will go in and start thinking about their business, their LinkedIn profile, and their resume. And those are assets, pieces of you, they're not you. And it's really what changes the conversation, especially when you're pitching your business, for example, to say, hey, these are all my data, this is my demographics, this is my psychographics, and all the things that we spend time doing, to present our business. And we forget to tell the story of the why, right? And so that's where branding comes in. And for me, it took me a while. It took me actually like 8 years to figure this out. Nobody was helping me out, so I made all the mistakes for you. I went to Twitter jail for you a couple times, actually. I figured it out many different times with making many different mistakes, and understanding that the elements of a brand are key to building your brand. You are your business. You are part of your business. You're driving this. You're the face of that business. And so these key elements include a mission, attributes, character, story, and SEO. And I'll break it down quickly for you. So your mission is your personal mission, not your brand's mission. Your brand has its own mission. Your company has its own mission, but you have to have your own mission. What are you doing for the world? What is beyond your brand, right? What are you here to do? You get to give yourself that purpose. The second thing is attributes. We all have personality attributes. We have core attributes. We have love languages. Take time to assess. I'll speak a little bit more about this later, but this is about assessing who you are today, who you want to become, right? There's an aspiration to that. Certainly, I am not the person I was 8 years ago when I started this. I will not hopefully be 8 years from now. I keep evolving. So what are those attributes that I'm playing up or down in my space to deliver that feeling to my audiences? Character. These are core values, right? So, personally, I was born in a very deep Christian home, with really solid, cultural values and religious values. As I grew up, I was like, okay, which serves me and which doesn't, right? I'm my own person. So we have these societal, cultural, religious values that we have been given. What do you do with that? How do you go out and do business in life? You get to decide that. That's character, right? Story. We all have story. How do we leverage that? Usually, it's the origin story that makes us unique. Nobody else has that. Nobody else has that lived experience. So this is where you begin to think about your own story, how that serves you. And SEO, this is a marketing term that you may know. It's a search engine optimization. And I often like to say you are the CEO of your SEO. Basically, you're in charge of that. If you Google yourself today, what shows up? And if you don't like what shows up, you got to change it. If nothing shows up, you got to change it, right? If somebody else shows up, you got to change it. So all these things to consider when you're building your brand. And so for me, this was when I started, as I said, 8 years ago. And for me, this was a daunting process. There I am. This is actually my first profile photo at Microsoft. I had been recruited at Microsoft. In fact, I never really applied because I was scared to. I didn't think I could work for this company. I had imposter syndrome all day long. And, I was working in another company here, actually in Miami, and the phone rang and it was Microsoft and they brought me along. I was ecstatic. I was like, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm here. Only the smile didn't last too long, by the way, because as I joined the company a few weeks in, I began to realize I was getting bullied by 4 women in my own organization. And at first I didn't know what that was. Honestly, I was confused, right? There was some things happening and I was like, okay, is it because I'm new? Is it like, this is the culture? I don't know what's happening. And so I navigated that for a while. In fact, I navigated it for a year. I was trying to figure out what was happening. And I realized as time went by that this was not a cultural thing or even a company thing. This was a targeted approach. And so as I, realized this more and more, and I became agitated and frustrated. One time I remember walking in and we were actually in Fort Lauderdale and we had this open space environment. So we all had desks that you could kind of look out and see where everybody else was working. So I walked in, it was like 8 in the morning. And I walk up to my desk and I see this physical thing they had left on my desk. And so I walked up to it and I was like, okay, you know what? You guys win, I quit. Right? I was like, I'm done. And so I packed up and, walked right out. And a PM, program manager, stopped me. And, from leaving, he's like, Miriam, you can't leave. And I was like, what do you mean I can't leave? It's like, you can't leave. Microsoft needs you. And I was like, what do you mean Microsoft needs me? There's probably a line of people waiting for me to quit so they can get my job, right? And he's like, no, Miriam, I want you to go home. I want you to think about this. Don't quit, please. Sleep on it. Think about it. So I promised him I would, and I did. So I went home and I realized that, if I were to come back the next day, right, what was I going to do? Like, I realized I had no purpose, honestly. Up until that point, I've been living my life just kind of nonchalantly, doing what you do. Go to school, graduate, get married, have a couple kids, start your career. At this point, I'm mid-career. I'm working at a great company. Like, what more, right, can I ask for? But truly, I had nothing personal that was mine to give to the world. I had not decided that. And that was where I got stuck. That's where I was just like, oh, when a situation like this happens, what am I about? What defines me, right? No purpose. Definitely a mix of attributes. When you look at people that are influencers, people that you respect in digital media, brands, even corporate, they have a set of attributes that are consistent, that is strong. They have defined that for themselves. So the same thing goes for you. You got to do that for yourself. What are those attributes? What are you going to play up and down? No character definition. Certainly I had not made contracts with myself about how I was going to do business, how I was going to do life. I was just kind of, navigating life and be like, yeah, that's how I do life, right? Nothing intentional, if you will. No story. Certainly I had a story, but I just didn't know how to play it up, how to leverage my own lived experiences to tell the world, right? And then if you binged me or Googled me, you'll probably just find like my address or my parents' address. I don't know. So this was me. This was me 8 years ago. And what prompted me to go, okay, I need to do something different. So of course, I'm still here at Microsoft, which means I did come back the next day and I came back with a mission. So I am a marketer by trade and a communicator. And so I created a mission statement for myself. This is it. It's as simple as this. I am blank and blank. I didn't know what that was going to look like. It was kind of filling in because the world needs, I didn't even know what the world needed. I just knew that I needed to fulfill that somewhere and somehow in order to do what? So I started there and I want to give you this to think about as well. And it doesn't have to be this mission statement, by the way. You can create your own, but certainly it is important that you have one for yourself. Certainly it is important that you derive a mission for what you're going to go do, how you're going to be immortalized, what is your mark going to be in the world beyond the company, beyond a job, beyond all the things that we think are it and they're not. Because the minute your job fails or the minute your business fails, I hope it doesn't, but if it does, that doesn't define you, right? You have a mission that is beyond that, and that's brand. So I went out with this and I started to break it down a little bit. I was like, okay, let me start here. At Microsoft, we are driven by data. All of us is like, hey, data tells the story. And so I was gathering data at the moment. I didn't know who I was. So I began to ask people one big question: how do I show up? And this was an exercise that I told you I did a lot of fails. This was a big fail for me because I began to ask a lot of people, and I didn't use any mechanisms like surveys or anything. I literally asked in person, like, hey, how do I show up? And I got a lot of answers by a lot of people. I discovered I had a lot of haters. It's just like, oh, okay, I show up like that. Wow. But it was good to learn, right? It was good to learn. So I want to encourage you to do the same. Ask people how you show up. Today we have many mechanisms. Create an anonymous survey. Say, hey, I took this course with Miri about branding. I want to know where my baseline is. How do I get started, right? I needed to know where I was, how I was being perceived first before I go out and change that if I had to change something. Now, if everybody tells you show up awesome, please don't change that. I did not show up awesome. There were two things that really called my attention when I got a lot of answers, and we got to see some themes. The first one is I showed up sarcastic. Like deeply sarcastic. And I was like, well, what's the problem with that? I was like, that's a good thing, no? But then I realized it wasn't, because sarcasm, it's not, it's an attribute. So these things are not good or bad. Attributes are just it, but you have to match them up with your audience. And I came back the next day, not to talk to my bullies, but to talk to people that may be in the same situation. And so I targeted young women in tech. Actually younger than me. I was in my 30s at the time, and I was targeting people in their 20s that had just maybe gotten out of college, were starting at Microsoft, and it was daunting, right? I was like, wow, if I'm scared to be here, I can't even imagine somebody walking in and not knowing what to do in this situation. Maybe they're bullying other people, and sure they were. So I targeted them, and I said, well, if I show up sarcastic, I'm not going to be relevant to this audience, right? So the first thing is understand your audience. Who do you want to serve with your brand? Who do you want to serve with your story? And as you begin to understand who you are and how you show up today, then you can be like, hey, I'm going to modify this a little bit. So I showed up sarcastic. The second thing is I showed up feminist. Now that's a thing. Of course I'm feminist, right? I mean, I grew up in the slums of Venezuela. My mom is an extreme feminist, 3 daughters. You don't let a man open the doors. You have 2 good arms, right? All the things. And I lived that very much. And then as I grew up, I'm talking about those core values, I realized, I have 2 boys, and I was raising them to open doors for women, for girls, right? So there was this contention of like, wait, does this serve me? And especially if my brand was going to be global, which if you're digital, it will be, right? So this kind of extremism didn't show up well in parts of Africa, for example, or Latin America. Being attached to men bashing by calling yourself a feminist was something that I did not want to be a part of. So I dialed that down, and I decided, okay, I'm still for women and women empowerment. How do I dial it down? So I showed up feminist. I dialed it down to feminine. And then sarcasm, I switched it completely to kindness, which my family was just like, really? You're going to stop being sarcastic? Not really. I'm just going to play it down a little bit. So I began to look at myself and how I showed up. I also began to gather data with storytelling. And that's the second piece, right? The world is big. I hope you do get to reach the entire 8 billion people on the planet. I haven't. That wasn't even my mission anyway. But for me, the world was my girls. I call them my girls. Women in tech, right? Young women in tech, early in career. So that's my world. Who is your world? Who can you connect with? Who can you impact with your story? You've been given a geographical location, a psychographical location to connect with people. You've been given the internet. I mean, the world is yours, right? Who are you going to reach? You got to get targeted, because if you're not targeted, you're shooting blanks with your brand. You're not appealing to anyone specific. In order to do what? What is your legacy? What will you be known for, right? And so for me, this was really important to define that at this stage before I even began. And I began to think about this. I want to just share with you digitally when I started doing this. And it looks, actually, I have the real example here for you. But this is called Your Origin Story. Mine looks like this. I'm going to actually show you digitally what it looks like. I'm a storyteller. So I began to kind of map out my own story. Kind of started to read my past chapters, if you will, so I could write intentionally the next chapters to come. So yes, I'm old. I was born in 78. I began to think about, when I was born, and then the next thing that happened that for me was significant. My little sister was born, made me a middle sister. Nobody wants to be a middle sister. That was a low in my life. Just kind of ideation of like, what my life looked like, what was a high and low. This looks a little bit linear in this space. The real one that I did, this is my first one, has a lot of color. I used a lot of symbols, but Driving and creating your origin story is extremely important because you're going to begin to see patterns of your life and how they serve you and how they became you. And then you're going to be able to use that to build the next chapters. This is actually my first origin story. I've done many after this, but you can see here lots of chaos, lots of heartbreak too. That's me. That's I think that's up to like maybe 2012. It's the first time I did this, so it's been quite a while. So you take and you do this, and then you match that up with people talking about how you made them feel, and now you have baseline. Now you're like, oh, this is who I am. What do I do with that? And storytelling comes in, right? I'm a storyteller by trade as well. Been doing this for a few years now. I do it for core services engineering, and I sit in the storytelling council at Microsoft. We have over 4,000 storytellers worldwide in all business functions. So this is HR, this is sales, this is marketing, this is finance. And so we devise and create and design stories to be told from different places of Microsoft to different audiences at Microsoft. I mean, we have a 12-year-old Xbox player, and then we have a 51-year-old cloud engineer, and our stories are different, but our universal truth is the same. And that's what I want to share with you today in storytelling. When I began to do this work, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I quickly found out I was not. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was failing fast. I came from Miami. I was taken to Seattle to do this job, and I would literally come home to my husband and be like, "Hey, hon, I think we need to pack because we're getting fired today. I am not delivering impact in this role at all." I was scared, and I also was taking my master's course in Georgetown with a track in design thinking and UX, and so it occurred to me to do two things. First of all, ask people what storytelling is not. And this was powerful. Ask people. When you don't know, ask people. I went on LinkedIn and I literally reached out to everyone in high places. These were CEOs of Coca-Cola and Disney. This was people at Marriott and Hyatt, of course, Google and Amazon and all the things, big and small brands. And I asked them the question, what is not storytelling? These are film producers of movies like The Lion King. And so as I thought about this, I gathered information, and then I realized the definition of storytelling that people tell you out there was not good for me. So I went and defined it myself, right? Somebody thought of it, so I'm going to think of mine. And I defined storytelling as the emotional transfer of information. Storytelling is not information or data. It is not facts. It is not marketing. It is not, assertions or opinions. But storytelling is the transfer, the emotional transfer of all of that. It's the difference between your resume, for example, that says I graduated from so-and-so university, and story is I graduated from so-so university and I had to work 3 jobs because I'm an immigrant and my parents didn't have money to put me through school, which is a true story, by the way, right? At 16, I started working. That's a story, right? That changes perspective. So storytelling enables you to connect in a deep level, such deep level, it actually is 22 times more memorable than any piece of information you will ever share. So yes to your PowerPoint presentations, yes to your wonderful data, but if you don't have it in story form, it won't land as well. It won't be remembered. You will probably remember less than 74% of this information that I'm sharing with you an hour from now. You'll lose 74%. But if I tell a story, you'll remember my story, right? And I already told a story about my bullying. So where do we start? How do we use that information that you gathered, that data, to build your brand? To be memorable, to give yourself a mission. I told you I was taking a UX course in design thinking. So I used that. I actually grabbed design thinking as a model and I began to think through how to insert this to build my brand and my story. And I found it very ironic that the first and last step, because really it's a cycle of design thinking, is to empathize. And I was like, oh, this sucks because I'm not an empath. In fact, when I took all those personality tests to find out who I was and all that stuff, empathy showed up really low on my scale. There's a test called Clifton Strengths. So it kind of showcases your strengths. Empathy out of the 35 personality attributes was number 33 for me. So not an empath. My children call me cold and ruthless. And I say, what is the problem with that? Like, I don't see the problem. But so I had to learn that empathy is not just a personality trait. It's actually a skill set. And I was talking about empathy years before that became a thing. I know we're hearing about it more, like lead with empathy, be empathetic, EQ. That was not a thing 5 years ago, right? So empathy is the first step to you building your brand. And there's that universal truth that I'm talking about. Empathy is about you asking yourself, hey, what feeling am I going to spark with my audience? When I walk into the digital room, when I send an email, when I send a tweet, when I post on Instagram and TikTok, what feeling am I leaving with my audience? Because we're all doing that, intentionally or unintentionally. So you can show up on LinkedIn, right, and be like, oh, very professional and tell a good story, but that's not that. LinkedIn is one aspect of you. If you're also on TikTok, people are also watching that, right? And so, how is your story delivering through these touch points who you are, the truth of who you are? A universal truth is something that you don't have to explain to people. I'll share, for example, Microsoft's universal truth. 7 years ago, our CEO changed our mission statement. We went from a PC on every desk and every home, which served us for about 30 years, to contending with the Googles and the Amazons of the world. So we have to change, right? So we rebranded, and our mission became to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And this is powerful because it began to become our truth. Empowerment is our truth. And so I live that, right? I know what it feels like or not to be empowered. I don't have to explain to anyone in this room what empowerment is. What is that truth for your brand? For me, it became belonging, if you're asking my personal brand. My brand is about belonging. I want to make people feel when they come in contact with me that they belong in the space that they are, especially for women in tech. What is your brand about? That's something you should be thinking about. There's 3 levels of empathy I found out. And the first one is called cognitive empathy. There you are, building your brand, building your business, building your story. And just remembering that people are around you, right? The people that you're coming in touch with every single day, digitally or in person, you are delivering that truth to them, whether you want it or not. So at the cognitive level, it's telling yourself, reminding yourself that these people are human. That's very important. That's super important. Why? Because we make it transactional at times, especially if it's digital. It becomes a transactional thing, and it isn't. It's a human thing. And so when we begin to remind ourselves at the cognitive level in our brains, these are my humans, like my girls are my humans. The brain does something different. It delivers something different with your brand. You think about it differently. You change language a little bit. And so cognitive empathy is a practice. You can become one. The second level of empathy is emotional empathy, a little bit different, a little deeper. This one is when you not only recognize that your audience is human, whether at the corporate level or at the brand level, the personal brand level, but you're human, right? So I'm not only representing Microsoft, I'm Miri from Microsoft, but I'm Miri. I'm Miri the mom, I'm Miri the dog owner, I'm Miri the spouse, I'm Miri the friend, I'm Miri the sister, I'm Miri the daughter, right? So I show up at this level of humanity where other people get to empathize with me. How boring would it be if I show up all the time, oh, Miri, the head of global interest, oh, Miri, the author, and that's all I give to the world. That's it, right? Nobody wants to hear that. It's boring. But I can show up and have a bad day because my dog passed away 2 weeks ago, and I can talk about that, and people begin to empathize with Miri, the dog owner, right? The dog mom. That's emotional empathy. I get to show up human. And then at the deepest level, this is one I struggle with the most personally, but I do practice it, is compassionate empathy. And this is, as you see the illustration here, this is you just kind of opening up with yourself. You don't have to do much more, but just reflecting on your own emotion, reflecting on your own humanity in that human condition, right? And that changes scope for you. And that's a very introspective approach to business, to branding, because the more you do that, the more you pause and be like, man, not at my best today. Bad day today. The more you do that, the more you're able to empathize with other people and become an emotional empath and then a cognitive empath. And with that, you can begin to design your brand story and your brand. You can begin to empathize at a deeper level. You can understand the experience that other people might be going through. Imagine if all of us, the day the pandemic hit and we got locked down, started to write a book about our daily experience. Imagine if we all talked about it in our own spaces. Now this is gonna go down in history, but only historians will write about it, and those are the books that people will read. What if we all worldwide would have written a book about our own experiences and understood that all of us are going through a global pandemic differently? We're consuming that experience and living that different, and it's impacting us differently. Some of us lost people. Some people lost their lives. I mean, it's just been a remarkably incredible thing that happened to remind us of the human condition. And it's enabled us to empathize with each other and our brands to define ourselves differently, right? And so the second step is defining. So step one, you empathize with yourself, with your audience. Then you define your story, your brand. right? So you've created attributes, you've thought about your mission. Now you're going to go create that. What is the story mission, right? What stories are you going to go tell? You've lived a whole lot, up until this point. There's lots of stories there that you can pick up. Which stories are you going to go tell? So there's a brand mission that you give, that you create, and then there's a story mission, right? So I've told different stories, of course. I have now hybrid audiences. And so I choose my different stories for my different audiences. And I give them each a mission. My story is dedicated to this persona, this demographic, this psychographic, and it's going to help them do what? Right? What is my story? What am I doing with the story? In the case of my girls, it was to help them understand that I've gone through something as well. So had they. And so we're in it together, right? And make them feel like they also belong. That was the mission of telling that story. Now, of course, I have other stories that I tell other people, but just remind yourself every single time your audience is human. And so at the cognitive empathy level, give you every story a mission. Define the story mission. Define your characters. Ideate and think about that. Step 3, think about how to best tell that story. Now, what I'm showing here, it's called Scamper. This is a storytelling brainstorming tool that I use a lot in my storytelling technique, because sometimes we think we have a great story and then we don't. And that explain, I started to write stories for, as I said, for our core services engineers, and I'm not an engineer. So I was failing for about 3 months. And I thought I was doing a good job at first. I was like, hey, I'm a writer. I'm a marketer. I can do this. And I was doing podcasts, interviews, long form, short form videos, fail. And it wasn't that my content wasn't good. It was that I was not empathizing with my audience. I had not stopped and paused to be like in their space to understand. So I paused and I was like, okay, let me just scratch everything. Let me start having conversations with these engineers. These were engineers that were taking our on-premises data to the cloud. The stories were about our digital transformation inside Microsoft, so people outside Microsoft could understand what was happening. We were using our own technologies, Azure, for example, and we were doing a shift and lift. So just different things that we were moving through in a space that we were leading. And so the world was staring at us. The world was looking at, what is Microsoft doing? What's going to happen to the cloud? And so I learned quickly through this pause moment that our engineers, not only were they working extremely hard, they were freaking out that they will lose their jobs, because they thought, wow, if I take all the on-premises data to the cloud, and then that means I become a cloud engineer. I don't know what that looks like. We've never been cloud engineers before. This is new technology. So they were scared, right? And so I began to think about using Scamper. I was like, what if I modify something about the story? What if I eliminate? What if I reverse? What if I substitute? I began to think about the intersectionality of the stories. And I realized, wow, there's a lot more to these engineers than just the story of how we're using our own technologies to digital transform at Microsoft. And so this works this way. Look at your story, look at your origin story and go, what if I modified something? What if I eliminated? What if I substituted? A lot of people are like, hey, Mary, I want to tell stories of my, of my trajectory. I've had, for example, child abuse, I've heard, but I don't want to go out and tell that story. What do I say? And I'm like, well, you don't have to use your own personal, experience. You can use it by creating, a fictional character, for example, and having them go through that experience in another time frame. And the lesson to your audience is the same, right? So you ideate ways to deliver your own stories. In the end, it's back to that mission. What do you want your audience to feel when they come in contact with you? This is just one example of how you can ideate. Brainstorming, it comes in different ways. You can mind map, you can do a 6-hat thinking approach. Google brainstorming ideas for storytelling. You'll get plenty. Somebody invented the hero's journey, right? That's somebody decided that. You can create your own, right? There's thousands of ways to create stories. Story structures come in different ways and shapes and sizes. And I've built them. I've created different ways. So you can start with, there's one called in media res. Basically, it's like it starts with the climax of the story. My mother died when I was 5, boom, right? And then you go around until the rest of the story. Just so many ways for you to deliver. But the best way, you only know it because you should be empathizing with your audience. Then you get to prototype, right? You learn your audiences. You're like, okay, I think I know where I'm going with my brand, what I want to share. I'll start with when I was 8, or I'll start from now and where I'm struggling with today. And I want to share, my knowledge or my insights or what I'm learning at this point in my life. And you begin to prototype these stories. Could they be on TikTok? Should they be on Instagram? Should they be on LinkedIn? I don't know. Where is your audience, right? And it looked like this for me. So I use LinkedIn a whole lot for testing my content, because I have a bigger audience there. I have a hybrid audience. So a lot of people follow me on LinkedIn that it's not my target audience, right? These are not my girls. This is just everybody. This is the world. And so I test content there. This is actually a year ago, in April 1st of last year. And it was my dog's birthday. And I was in Bellevue, Washington, and we were locked down. So I was talking about how pets make you feel better during COVID-19, right? So, and I tested content. I say I'm testing it because I know everybody's there. And so I'm gonna get some reactions. And sure I did. Some people came in, they're like, hey, Miri, this is not Facebook. This is a professional LinkedIn platform. So why are you putting your dog on LinkedIn? To which I responded, well, who died and made you content manager? Delete and block. Right. And this is how you begin to empower yourself with content, because you know what you're targeting. And so it doesn't matter. It wasn't for them. Like, thanks for stopping by, delete and block. They're my favorite buttons, by the way. So I begin to test content to see the reactions. And then I go to where I really want to go, right? So Twitter's where actually I do content for my tech audience. Most of my Microsoft audience is here and partners there. But Instagram is where my girls are. So I've dedicated this to them, right? This is where they live. And so I go to Instagram and I'm the Miri, the mom Miri, I'm the sister Miri, I'm all the girl Miri things happen on Instagram for them. And so are these conflicting? Is it a different Miri? Am I not being authentic? No, it's all of them are me. There's just different audiences, and I allow myself to explore different facets of who I am. They are complementing to who I am. And so that's how branding works. And you see people get curious, right? Like, who is this Miri putting a dog on LinkedIn? Now I have a panel. Somebody created a Google panel and a Bing panel for me. That's wonderful. I've never paid for SEO in my life ever, right? And my website's the first number one. So I broke algorithms, right? Because people got curious. People get curious about your story. Well, Miri, I didn't go to the moon. I don't have an extraordinary story. I didn't either. I got bullied. It's not a great story. It's just a story. But it became extraordinary because I made a lesson out of it to share, and I gave myself a mission from that. So that's how branding works. Think about testing your content. Ask yourself, hey, did my story evoke that emotion that I wanted? That consistency every single time. It's a long haul approach, by the way. It's not instant gratification, right? It's not insta likes. It's your brand. It's who you are. It's what you will be known for. It's what the world will come to know you as. And then you begin to build that and evolve that as you go. So remember, if it doesn't have a character, a plot, and a conclusion, it's not a story. The story is really made of these characters. You can play them up, play them down. You can be a character, an active or a passive character in your own story. But it is your story to design. It is your story to tell. You own it. And if you're not telling it, somebody else is. And so you don't want that. You want to have control over your SEO and your story. So ideate. And remember that, stories are not they're not just to your audience, they're for them. So you're packaging them up, you're being authentic, you're being empathetic, you're learning empathy. Like me, I'm certainly more empathetic than I was 3 years ago. I think my kids will say no, but I want to say yes, because I'm doing it with my heart, right? And that's the biggest thing. It's you really do it with your heart, and that's the authenticity of story. Make contracts with yourself. Ask yourself why that's important to you. And if the answer is to get likes, revisit, because for me, it's beyond that, right? It's really connecting with these girls one-on-one and letting them know, hey, you're going to be okay. I almost left Microsoft. If you would leave and I would leave, then we contribute to that gap of like women in tech. Let's not do that. Let's pause that, right? Let's stay. It's not easy. It's not, we're not there yet. We're the Rosa Parks of the digital age. It's still happening. But if I stay and you stay and more people stay, we're paving the way for the girls behind us and the girls after that and the girls after that, right? So there's a purpose to the story. So it's your turn. Use your brand, use your story, and do it with heart. And I'll stop sharing now. I'm sure you have questions.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wow. Every time you present, it just inspires me. It just gives me motivation that I need to tell my story. And
you do.
Hopefully that everybody else in here, all the young entrepreneurs are ready to share their story because they've been sharing their stuff behind scenes. Now just to let the world know. Oh my gosh. You mentioned something. I have a question. You mentioned you talked about empathy. It was the different stages you talked about.
Yeah.
How do you identify or recognize what your strengths of empathy would be? Like, compassionate,
Yeah.
like how do you try to get those elements, you know, build those elements so you get stronger and kind of realize, hey, that's my strength. I want to really focus in on that. Could be, I think that's something I want to look into a little bit more.
Yeah, for me, again, it was the journey. I can tell you that. And I started with taking a lot of personality tests, and I recommend you do that. Everyone do that. There's so many out there. I can put some on the chat. There's some free ones, but there's some like the Clifton Strengths one is the one that tells you it's actually your DNA, which is a little different than just a regular personality test like Myers-Briggs, because it breaks down like your story of when you were a child, how you reacted to certain situations. So it's a very detailed, that's what they call it, DNA to your personality, which is very core to who you are. And so for me, it was learning more and more like my own behaviors. It's really introspective journey. And not beating myself for it, up for it. It was like, oh, I'm not an empath. Crap, right? I was like, okay, well, can I become one? And that's where I think it's this idea of you being able to assess who you are today and then assess where you want to go. I mean, I've met hundreds of people that are celebrity style, celebrity level. And when you meet them in person, you would be surprised at the real personality, right? So they are people that have been able to show up on stage, show up very confident. The reality is they're not. And so this is something that they've chosen. I've learned that confidence, for example, is a choice, not a feeling. And so we all get to choose, and it really is the why. Why do you choose that? For me, it's been like, hey, if I show up strong for my women, they see that representation. If I write a book, they see a Latina that's an author, right? So all these things are beyond me. It's what legacy I'm leaving for what mission is. So learning yourself is important, and playing that up and being able to modify that, adapt that for your audience is important. So I've met people who their brand is extremely sarcastic and it works really well for them, and especially in the tech space, because tech people love their sarcasm. So I play that up as well. When my audience is only tech, you will see all the sarcasm happening. So it's learning that. It's learning the art of your own personality, learning who you are, and then playing that up.
Wow. No, that's powerful. That's powerful. You said something legacy. I thought that's very important.
Yeah.
You also, I always bring it back full circle to this quote someone, an older lady mentioned to me. She says,
Yeah.
you know, as individuals, our journey is to explore, but also to give of ourselves,
Yes.
others. And once you recognize that, you will always be blessed, no
Yes.
matter what the situation. So that's, I've been teaching for many years. You've been doing it, and you hear someone maybe 2 years from now come back saying, Mary, you inspired me to do this, to change my
Mhm.
life. And
Mhm.
that is powerful because you left something. You
You
left your
did.
mark. And what
Yes.
you do is powerful. I think, you're going to continue to change lives and have people change their stories.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully this can help our students here, right here. Michael, how was this? How was this, Michael? Michael's so focused, man.
I thought this was excellent. Empathy is I don't know, something I've probably had most of my life, I think, but I just really related to what you said. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Wow. Well, that
I'm I'm putting on the chat just the different personality tests that you can take. The last ones are all free. The first one is the Clifton Strengths. That is the deepest one, the Gallup. I recommend. I think it's maybe like $30. Invest in yourself. You are your business is you, right? You're the CEO of your life. So spend $30 and assess who you are at the deepest level. Learn who you are so you can play that up for your audience. It's really important.
wonderful. Wow. Well, any questions for Mira once we have her here, or? Okay. Well, listen, Mara, I just want to say thank you for your time and information, and the Nifty World and everybody here loves what you do. Continue making a difference, what you do.
Thank you. You are all the change makers as well. So I appreciate what you do. Each of you are here, have your mission, and live your mission. That's really important. And Nifty is an organization that enables you to discover that more and more. So stay plugged in. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye.
Bye. See. Okay. Michael, when would you like to schedule some time to work on the numbers?
I think maybe I will maybe contact you tomorrow sometime, I think.
Okay.
Now I know that you had sent the calendar set like 3:30 to 7:30 is, but
You could work around that. Just call me
work
anytime.
around it.
If you want to call me early, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so I'm really let my subconscious work on all this stuff, and then I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you again, okay?
All right, thank you.
Okay, great. Yotoya and Lee. Yotoya and Lee. Hello.
Hello. Sorry.
It's all good. But hopefully the information was helpful. How you come along with the program? If you need any concern, you got my cell phone. Call me. Bounce some ideas off. I'm here.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye bye. Yotoya, how you doing? Otherwise, I see you just sent something in the chat. Yeah, and the same thing. If you need me, just let me know. Reach out. So we can make sure you make it through the course. Okay. All righty. On that note, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you next time.